So my name is Kylie Miller. I'm the social worker here at Casteel. So again, thank you all so much for being here. We've got a lot of really good information for you tonight. I know right now is a really tough time for teens and parents and just everyone. And so we are hoping that you learn some valuable tools for helping your teens. And it's going to be, like I said, a lot of really good information. Let me admit some people. So those in the back can move forward since not everyone is here, but I'm just going to turn it over to our speaker, Garron, and he can, the bathroom. So if you need to use the restroom, you can go out this door right here, and the bathrooms are just straight across, and then that door should still be unlocked for you to get back in. And then we just ask that you stay in your seat just so that we can, make sure that we're distanced and that we're safe. We're trying to get this to as many people as possible. We're on Google Meets recording so that we can send this out to people who aren't able to be here. At the end, we will save some time for question and answer. So we hope you enjoy, and I'm going to turn it over to our speaker.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and I'll try to get in the camera here for you guys at home too. If I step outside, I tend to be a wanderer as I speak. So again, for those of you watching from home, hopefully you'll be able to hear me as I wander. If not, please make a comment and they can let me know. But I really appreciate the opportunity. I do love giving presentations like this, love educating people, I love talking about teens. I've been working with teens for on and off for 20 years in different capacities. And teens are they're challenging, but they're rewarding, and like I said, it's just a big passion of mine. The challenge working with teens, I also like interaction, so I will do some interaction hopefully, but I know I have to minimize it because the people at home, they won't be able to hear you. But anybody know what the most difficult challenge working with teens is? Any thoughts?
Hormones.
Hormones, okay, there's one. That's difficult. Any other ideas? What make it, especially from a mental health perspective, perhaps, what's the biggest challenge? What? Peer pressure is a big one. You have any other thoughts? Raise your hand, I'll get to you. Not fully developed brains. That is a very true concept. Not till what, about 25 we're told. Yeah. Yeah, generation gap, communication. Absolutely. I'll get to my answer in a moment. These are all great answers and they're all very true. One thing working with teens and parenting stuff, I always ask, what's the quickest way to offend someone? Any thoughts there? Challenge their parenting. That offends people more than anything, and so I'm going to do my best not to offend anybody, but chances are that might happen, and if I do, I apologize. And I thought I would just get it out of the way right in the beginning, and then we can just move on and get to the information. The biggest challenge of working with teens is working with their parents at times, and so it's a lot of counselors can stop that because it's a challenge. Parents don't like to be told that they're not doing it right. Now, good news is if you're sitting here in these seats, you want to learn some skills and tools, so I'm assuming you won't be offended by that. But that can be. I mean, we look at our family and our friends, a lot of conflict in families and amongst friends come when our kids get to be teenagers and we start to differ in our opinions and how kids should be raised. So that's a big challenge and at times. But when I work with people in the office, I always tell my teens and their parents when they come in, the expectation is as parents not to expect to drop off your kid in counseling and expect the therapist or me to fix them. That this is the whole idea of the village, right? It takes to raise a kid. And so I always want parents to be willing to come in and learn some skills and some tools on their own. But I also don't want the kid to think they're off the hook either. It takes both sides being willing to look in the mirror. So that's really my big request is tonight, whether you're home or here, is be willing to look in the mirror and see what you can do differently to help your kid in these challenging times. Because the topic obviously tonight is understanding and helping our kids cope with depression and anxiety. And we know it's just skyrocketing in the world today. Teen suicide is at an alarming rate. My office is I get new teens every week, and depression and anxiety is at the root of that, or at least that's the presenting issue coming in a lot of the times. So we're working with that. So my hope here tonight is to be able to talk about that, understand not necessarily what depression and anxiety is. I think we have a good idea of that. I really want to give skills and tools and understand what's underneath the depression and the anxiety and what's really driving that, and then what we can do to mitigate that as best as we can. And so if there are questions throughout it, again, keep those. We'll save some time at the end, write them down so we don't mess up. Usually I like to answer questions and be a lot more interactive. Obviously, with doing stuff online too, people watching at home, it'd be difficult for them to hear your question, and so we'll do that at the end, unless there's just a burning question that you have to get answered in the moment. And maybe we'll break there and do that. Okay, so let's look at this. When we talk about depression and anxiety, we really want to look at two types. And that is one, biochemical, and two, situational. Biochemical is obviously just that. It's our bodies aren't creating the right hormones to regulate our emotions and our mood. And so the predominant form of treatment for that is medication, oftentimes. The other one is situational. In my experience as a therapist is that a lot of the kids coming in with this really is situational, and that's what we'll start off and talk about tonight. Now, if it's not, and it is biochemical, then I would encourage you to talk to your family physician, your pediatrician, or even a psychiatrist, and see if meds are the option. But we'll kind of talk about through the evening how to determine that and if that is a need or not. Okay, so I'm going to have some diagrams. I'm a visual learner and teacher, so I hope everybody can see the board and what I'm going to write. Once I get the diagram full for you here in the audience, it will also be put up on the screen up there, so you can hopefully see that. You'll also be able to have a link to get all the slides and stuff, or the diagrams after this that you can sign into, I believe. All right, so if we're looking at situational, that's what we're going to focus on. Kids today are under a lot of pressure from a lot of different topics and reasons. What are they? Usually I would go ahead and have you voice those out. We'll just go over them and talk about them a little bit one at a time. The number one thing probably is school. With school comes a few topics. Grades, they're under a lot of pressure from themselves, from home, from teachers to get specific grades and to achieve a certain, again, grade point average or whatever. So grades, college, where they're going to go, what they're going to do in life, what they're going to be. I had an 8th grader, 13 years old, come into my office, and he was a lot of anxiety. And when I asked him what he was anxious about, his statement was, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I thought, man, you're 13, go ride your bike, go play, go do something, you know. Don't worry about that right now. But that is not uncommon. Definitely when we get into high school, and again, those pressures come on, this idea that you got to get straight A's, you got to achieve, you got to go to whatever college you're going to be at. That's adding a lot of pressure on our kids today. Other things that cause a lot of pressure. Social life. That's obviously huge. One teen's big things that they need throughout adolescence is to fit in and to belong and to have a group that they call their own. So friends, either friend drama or lack of friends, can be a huge pressure in their life. The dating scene, whatever that means for them, and pressures there. Social media. I'm sure that's a whole nother topic of an evening. We'll talk about the influence and the challenges that social media have in the world today. When it comes to anxiety and depression, we don't have enough longitudinal study, but we are seeing that as depression and anxiety rise, so is social media use, smartphone use, devices, screen time. And in this field, we're not saying that it's causal. We can't say that yet. We may not ever, but it's correlational. There is a direct correlation between stress and anxiety and depression and the amount of time kids are on a device or a screen time. About a year, maybe a couple of years ago now, it came out that the average screen time that kids are on their devices, that could be phones, that could be iPads, computer games, whatever, video game consoles, it's about 7.5 hours a day is the average time that kids are spending on their device. And so obviously some a lot less, but some a lot more. I've definitely worked with kids that are up in the 10 hours a day, especially on the weekends. And so we're seeing that. Now my answer is not take your kid's phone away or whatever. There's balance. And again, that's probably a whole nother conversation and program, but it is correlational. And we do want to be aware of that through this process. Well, let's look at it for a moment. We will talk a little bit because again, that stress and that anxiety is what? They're kind of living in their own reality show, right? Because their lives are on 24/7 display. They can see what their friends are doing 24/7. Everybody can see what they're pretty much with, they post everything and they put it on Snapchat or Instagram or whatever. And so if the group of friends are getting together and they all post a picture, but your kid's not invited, they're going to see it within pretty much real time. They're going to be like, well, why wasn't I invited? And so that's going to affect them. When we were youth, if we missed out on an activity or a party or whatever, we didn't know until the next week if we ever even did find out. So we were oblivious, and so that kind of helped us out there. But for them, it's instant, and they know if they're not being included. And then obviously the things that can be said on social media about each other and that courage that comes behind the screen, that's a whole part of it. All right, so school and social life, huge piece of the puzzle. Another big one is family. Just family stress, family pressures, family struggles, divorce, families that don't get along, contention in the families, arguing, fighting, all those things can cause pressure and stress. Religion. That can be a huge stress for kids today. They're falling away, or not falling away, sorry, but they may not be as devout or as interested or believe as strongly as the parent does. And that can cause a lot of stress to them or pressure because most of them don't feel that they can tell a parent that they don't, or they're questioning, or they don't believe, or they believe something else. So then they have to go along and put on this show that, yeah, I believe, but I really don't. So that causes pressure. Next is sexual orientation. So the kids that either identify or have friends that identify with the LGBTQ community, that causes some pressure and some stress for some kids. Some kids none, and they're open about it. It is what it is. Other kids maybe, again, because family beliefs, religious beliefs, or whatever, they don't feel like they can be honest with that. The depression, the anxiety, the suicide rate amongst teen LGBTQ kids is really high. And so that's a struggle that they're struggling with. And then the final one could be trauma, or any kind of traumatic experience in their life that maybe they've talked about it, maybe they haven't, maybe you know about it, maybe you don't. Oftentimes as a therapist, it's very common that I'm the first person that somebody has shared that there's been abuse in their life. And that sometimes comes from adults that I work with. And they've carried it from teenage years all the way on through. And teens oftentimes won't even tell a counselor because they know we're mandated to report that. And so they might be just carrying it and we have no idea. And so those are probably some of the biggest things that does create challenges and pressure in their life. Now, let's look at this for a moment. I'll ask kids what they're feeling, you know, what feelings does this create? And what are some of the feeling words that come into your mind when you think about all these pressures that potentially could be going on in a kid's life? What might they be feeling? You can answer and raise your hand and throw it up there.
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Say that again. Rejection. Frustration. Excellent. The big one I hear is overwhelmed. Or exhausted. One kid said crushing. That was a pretty powerful statement by a young man that I was working with. And so those are some pretty strong verbs, and they're feeling these feelings. I'm going to kind of focus on the word overwhelmed for a moment, because that's the one that comes up a lot when kids talk about this. And so just think of ourselves when we're overwhelmed, and we're kind of living in a world that a lot of us, not just our teens, we as adults and parents are overwhelmed and struggling with a lot of things. And when we're overwhelmed, what do we want to do? Avoid. What else? Or what else comes to mind when we're overwhelmed? What do? Run away. Isolate. We do nothing sometimes, right? We don't have the energy. We just isolate, run away, avoid. That's what our teens are doing. A lot of kids will come in, or parents will say this about them, but they'll say about themselves and say, I have no motivation to do anything. And so we got that, no motivation. They're already in a state where do they like to be mostly when they're at home? In their rooms, right? Listening to music. They got their AirPods in or whatnot. They're listening to music. They're watching YouTube. They're doing their thing. They're on their phone. We did the same thing, just differently. We had the phone from the kitchen and the long 30-foot cord that's strung into our rooms. But they don't need that. They got their phone. They're isolating. They're not doing anything. They're unmotivated. All that starts to look like what? Depression. When somebody's depressed, what do we want to do to help them? Reach out. I think in our world, we want to medicate them. Oh, you obviously need some medication, some Prozac, some Paxil, some Zoloft, something to make yourself feel better, because you're clearly depressed, you're not doing anything, you're avoiding, you're not motivated, you're clearly depressed. And if we go to our doctor, now I don't want to offend anybody, if anybody's a physician, we need our physicians, but they are trained in the medical model predominantly. And again, they looked at symptoms. Oh, you're not doing anything, you're feeling sad, you don't find joy in the other activities you used to do. Well, that's depression. Let's put you on some depression medication. That's very common. Sometimes it's needed, but oftentimes, in my perspective, and what I want to just maybe give you a different train of thought tonight, not saying it's always the right one. Sometimes medication is very needed and very useful and beneficial for our children and for ourselves and anybody in that state. But oftentimes, that's the knee-jerk reaction when really they're overwhelmed, they feel a lot of pressure, they're stressed out. Put that one up there. And so really there's things going on, it's situational, that if we have some other skills and some tools to understand how to help our kids through it, then maybe we can forego the medication, if possible. And if not, then maybe we'll go to that route as a last resort. So that to me, and if you want to put that one up now, so we kind of see that. So what we want to do is understand this process a little bit, and we'll get more into that. One of the things that we don't want to do, and what I always ask kids, and they always get this answer right, when a teen comes to an adult, stereotypically, I know you guys are the exception to the rule, but thanks to other people, you know, when a teen goes to an adult and says, I'm so stressed out, I'm so overwhelmed, what's some of our typical responses? Okay, hopefully, I hope that's our response. That would be a good response, absolutely. What's a typical response? You don't know what stress is, right? You're only 16, you're only 17, you're only 13. You know, you don't have bills, you don't have kids to raise, you're talking back to you, you don't have a job, you know, you don't have all these things. We minimize and mitigate their challenges. Yeah, they don't have adult stress. Of course they don't, they're not adults yet, but they have teen stress, and it's real to them, and it's big to them, and we have to be able to acknowledge that, and I believe that is one of the biggest things we can do. Talk to them, and we'll talk more about that. But this at least is an overview of, again, what I find in the office and working with teens tends to be more often than not what's really going on under their anxiety and their depression and those feelings more than a biochemical problem. Again, if it is biochemical, great. Get them on some medication, get their brains operating correctly so that they can then incorporate some tools and some skills effectively. Okay, so that's that. We'll erase that again. You'll get all this later, or you can get access to it. So let's talk about emotion regulation for a moment. As a counselor, emotion regulation is probably one of the main things that brings people into counseling. Adults, teens, you name it. I have a few specialties. I work a lot with teens and their parents. I work a lot with addiction, and I learned a lot with marriage counseling and couples work. And pretty much, again, all of them are emotion regulation issues, amongst other things, but that is a foundational piece. So I think it's really important when we're trying to give our kids skills and tools to understand depression and anxiety, is also to understand some emotion regulation skills. And really with all of this, what I really stress to parents, one of the best things that you can do to help your kids with their emotions is what? Make sure you're managing your own emotions well, and that you're modeling effective emotion regulation skills. You know, just because our brains get developed at 25 and we're quote unquote adult doesn't mean we do great at managing our emotions. And as when we get teenagers, they test us to our limits. I know that I have 3 of them right now, and so all under one roof. And so it's challenging, and it can be, they can push us to our limits, but the greatest skill, one of the greatest skills we can do is know how to remain calm ourselves when they're really worked up, whether through anxiety or overly depressed and all of that. When we stay calm and cool-headed and keep our emotions in check, that's going to help them tremendously, because if we get elevated, clearly what's that probably going to do for them? They're going to elevate too, and then it's just going to be kind of a circus. And we've probably all been there. I know I have. And so it takes practice and it takes effort. So as I go over this next piece of emotion regulation skills, not only be looking at it for your team, but be looking at it for yourself. And so try to get this so you guys at home can see this a little better. There we go. Maybe they're perfect. And so hopefully this will make sense. I want to make sure people don't get too far away. Here is emotion. And emotion tends to drive what? What's our emotions drive? Action. Or I'll say reactions. We react according to our emotional state. And that's, again, pretty universal. The big question, though, is what drives our emotions? What is it that gets us anxious or depressed? We'll use anxiety. Anxiety night. I always say the big three emotions, we'll talk about this a little bit later, that bring people into counseling and gives us the big trouble, are anxiety, depression, and anger. And so those are the ones that tend to cause the most challenges in our life. So whether for ourselves or our kids, you can answer either way, but what makes us having strong anxiety or outside of biochemical? We're talking about situations. Expectations of what? Okay, good. Say that again. Change can be. Good. Anything that causes, and you can use anger in there, you can use depression. What makes us feel our emotion, get us worked up emotionally? Any other thoughts? Okay, our interpretation of events, he says. So excellent. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. So this one, we can say a lot of things. As parents, we can say our teens make us anxious. Right? Their behavior, them seeing them on their phone so much, them, what they do when they go out with their friends, whatever, when they get their license and they drive away for the first time. I know that raised my blood pressure a little bit each time. 2 drivers in my family as teens. Each time they got their license and they went off on that first day, drove out of the driveway, my blood pressure and my anxiety was rather high, in fear and hoping they will return home safely. And so, I'm going to kind of categorize these as situations. And so a lot of times that's what, our kids are, again, back to that list of things that are causing them anxiety and pressure and stress and being overwhelmed, all those outside influences. I say, if this is 100% true, and I teach this to teens, to adults, and you name it, if this is all 100% true, then we're in trouble, right? Why? Because most of the situations in our life that cause us high emotional states are what? They're out of our control. And this is out of our control, and that is predominantly influencing our emotions. Then I say we just end up being a puppet in the sick game of life. Life is just sitting here controlling us, and we're getting emotional, and we're getting panic attacks, or really depressed, or really angry and raged. And then again, we react to that, And then it becomes this vicious cycle. The good news is I don't think it's 100% true. And as this gentleman said, really one of the strongest things that really influences our emotions is our thoughts and perceptions about, or interpretation, as he said, of the situation. We have this idea, or these, what we call in the field, distorted thinking patterns that just come automatically. One author calls them ants, Dr. Amen, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. Automatic negative thoughts, they just come so quickly, so automatically. We don't even really often consciously know they're there. It goes from situation to emotion. And when we can slow that down, and we can help our children slow that down and help them see how their story in their head, sometimes I call it a story, in our heads, is really driving up that emotional state. And so, and that's true, again, for all of us. And there's common distorted thinking patterns. If you did a Google for that, you'd find probably 15 to 25 different distorted thinking patterns. I kind of stick to 6, 7, 8 or so common ones. We like to catastrophize. Worst case scenarios in our head. We like to assume. We all know what that does. We've been told, right? We like to take things personally. Our kids are doing this. This one's a big one for teens, taking things personally, because by nature and by their development, their brain development in a teen's world, I always say like this: if this is the teen, this is the world, right? The world evolves around the teen in their mind. Everybody's looking at them. Everybody's thinking about them. Everybody's judging them. We are, friends are, strangers are. Everything is personal to a teenager. So they do that. We like to use absolute thinking or absolute talk. That's the always, never, constantly. And if we use that language with our kid, that'll cause some contention there. We like to mind read. Tell people what they're thinking and feeling. We'll come back to that. And there's others. I'll probably think of them as we go along. But the idea is here we have these automatic distorted thinking patterns that are influencing our emotions, that are influencing our team's emotions every day. And because somebody mentioned earlier brain development, that's a huge piece of the puzzle, because a teen's brain is still under construction. It's still developing. And the part that's really on overdrive right now is their limbic system. That's responsible for their emotions. So they have, like, for emotional standpoint, they have the gas pedal of a Ferrari or a race car, but the braking system's on back order, or they have the braking system of a Model T Ford, right? It doesn't match their gas pedal at all. And so they get ramped up really easy. And that prefrontal cortex, the part of the logic, the reasoning part of the brain, the emotion regulation part, is still learning to grow, and it's still learning to fire together and operate. So we as parents kind of have to be that braking system for them. And this is one way that we can do that. One, we can model it. We can regulate our own emotions effectively and know our own stories in our own head, and then help them see the stories in their head and how oftentimes stories don't match reality and facts. So if we can get them to start to do that, not they're going to be great at it, not it's going to be easy for them, because they're going to go right to their thinking, and the world's ending. They got boyfriend, girlfriend broke up with them, and life is over as they know it. But as they start to work through that and learn that, no, that's not quite true. But again, it takes a lot of practice. It's like, this is like learning anything, a musical instrument, a sport, a hobby. It takes practice. Again, many of us adults still don't do very well with this. And so, but let's be realistic for a moment. Emotions aren't always black and white. So emotions are on a continuum. And if we use anxiety on this far end, we'll say a panic attack. Somewhere here is neutral. Somewhere over here is calm, peace, and tranquility. We don't really worry about what's on that side because, well, people don't come into therapy because they're too calm or too happy. They come in because they're on this side of the thing. Our kids aren't having problems because they're too zen. They're stressed out. So, but it's not just neutral panic attack. We got anxiety here. We'll put high end up here. Maybe here we just have concerned. We have worried. We have maybe some stress, some fear. Then anxiety, then a panic attack. So I don't want people to think, well, you just control your thoughts and you're always going to be calm and peaceful. No, that's not normal. Kids are going to have tests, maybe a test is going to cause some anxiety or something, but reality is maybe those things can cause some concern, some worry, maybe a little stress, and we know that by research that little stress is good for us. Stress helps us grow. It helps us become resilient, and we practice things to deal with that stress. But what takes us from stress or concerned and worried to anxiety and panic attack so often is what? The story in our head. So if we can get our kids, one, if we can get it, two, if we can get our teens to understand this process and help them regulate their emotions in all aspects of life, then when the going gets tough, they'll have this skill throughout the rest of their life. So I hope that makes sense. So we want them to learn to do by challenging, this is just one tool, but we want to respond instead of react. There's always a choice for that. So if you want, you can throw that one up there. And so that's what we're looking at, to some degree. And so this is I've found one of the most powerful ways in which we can help our kids understand their depression and their anxiety and their anger and all of that. So we could make a scale for depression, we can make a scale for anger. There's one for anger up there, and understand that there's this continuum of emotions, and it's not just but the problem is we live in a world where we don't have a very big emotional vocabulary. That can also now be one of the challenges. Now let's look at this. The last time I checked, there was about 150,000 words in the latest Webster's Dictionary. If we look at how many words depict emotion or represent emotion, that's going to be about, there's a little subjectivity here, but at least if I can find 2,000 to 3,000 feeling words. But in the average person's feeling vocabulary, we really stick to how many do we think? What's our emotional vocabulary range? About a dozen. Very good. About 12, 10 to 12 emotion words. And so again, I have found that we stick to these big words. I have anxiety. I am depressed. So much rage and anger. One skill we can help our kids with is ask them this question. This is what I ask my clients. If they come and say, I've got so much anxiety or I'm depressed, one, you acknowledge it. You don't say, no, you're not, or you don't know what depression is, or you don't know what anxiety is. you know, you have everything, you shouldn't be this way. We never want to minimize, again, their emotions or tell them what they are or are not feeling. So we want to acknowledge that, but then we want to challenge them and say, okay, if you couldn't use the word depressed, or if you couldn't use the word anxiety or anxious, what other word best describes your feelings at this moment or in this time of your life? And then you kind of push them a little bit to really dig a little deeper than just depressed, anxious, anxiety, anger. And it's funny because if you take 10 adults, 10 teens, they say they have anxiety or they're depressed, and you do that exercise with them, how many different words could you come up with? You could ultimately come up with 10 different experiences. And so we want to get to that underlying feeling. What is a more accurate and deliberate emotion word? If you want to, sorry, step down. And so one way that authors have said to help us with our emotions and our feelings, anxiety and depression, is expand our emotional vocabulary and really name it more specifically than just the big three. So these are just some, again, ones that I found that are common or that I like. You can find your own list, and it might be helpful to print something like this out and have your kid go, hey, can you just circle the three words that best describe how you're feeling right now? That'll give us a really, I think, a much more accurate picture of what's going on. If somebody says depressed, but the word they circle is alone or lonely, wow, that opens up a discussion. Now that could be back to that social piece. Maybe they don't feel like they have enough friends. Or if anxiety, they're talking about anxiety, but they really talk about, again, being overwhelmed or afraid or worried about something, then we can start, okay, what is that worry about? What's driving that? What's the situation? Now we can talk about what's your perception, what's your thoughts, what's your story about that, and really get into a discussion and get to know them. And that will open up a lot of different things. And so I hope that makes sense as at least, again, some background and some little things that we can really start to do to get to our kids' true feelings and what's going on. Let me grab a drink here because I'm going to lose my voice. So a couple of years ago, I did a presentation on how parents can connect with their kids. And so, I did reading, research, all this stuff. And then I thought, I want to go to the source. I want to ask teens what their parents can do to better connect with them. And so my kids were at that time freshmen and sophomore. And so I asked if they would ask their teachers if they could go into their class and ask the kids this question, if they could write it on a piece of paper and I could return it back to me. Wasn't sure what I was going to get because that freshman, sophomore year, it's kind of a challenging year for kids. To me, it's really one of the most challenging years for parents and for kids themselves is that 14, 15 freshman, sophomore year. I wasn't sure what kind of answers I was going to get, but I got like 35 just amazing answers. And I did the same thing preparing for this. I asked some of my teen clients. I didn't get to go into a school and get a big number, but I started asking what do parents do to better help you with depression and anxiety. And it's interesting that both questions, how to connect, how to help with depression and anxiety, one of the first things that they said, and the most consistent thing that they said was, I wish they would just listen. Wish they would just try to understand what I'm feeling and not tell me what I'm feeling or what I should be feeling. And so I think when we talk about what can we parents do to really connect with our teens is develop a relationship with them, a connection with them. And sometimes we think teens don't want anything to do with us. Teens don't want to connect with us. Well, maybe not on the level that we would like them to, but almost every teen that I've worked with and talked to, they do want a relationship and a connection with their parents. The challenge is a lot of times what we do as parents is when a kid comes to us with a problem or a stressor that they're having, maybe it's a friend stressor, maybe it's grades, maybe it's all those things that we talked about first. Again, typically, what do us parents do that's not effective in those situations? We minimize it.
We might want to fix it or
fix it. Excellent. Yeah, we turn into the fixers because we are the parents. We know, we've been there, done that. We're smart, we're talented. We want to fix. Good. And then so that fixing kind of turns into, for our kids, a lecture, right? Now we just start talking, we turn into Charlie Brown's teacher, and all our kids are hearing, wow, 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 and they're not listening to us because that's not what they want. But this doesn't really change as we grow up. I'm going to kind of slip into, here's marriage, some free marriage tips too, right? Spouses, more so you wives probably more than you husbands. When you want to sit down and vent to your husband, what do you want him to do? You want him to listen. You don't want him to fix it. Us guys typically be a fixer. Some wives are fixers too. We just want to vent, and we just want you to shut up and listen. Our teens are no different. Teens want to vent, and they want to get stuff off their shoulders, and they really would like us parents being that person. But in back of so many of their minds, we're going to lecture them. We're going to try to fix it. We might judge them. We might criticize them. We might tell them what they're doing or thinking is wrong or not right. And again, that could come from the religious standpoint, the LGBTQ standpoint, the friend standpoint, all of that. And we just go at them, but we think we're doing what? Helping them. We're being the parent. We're teaching them. And there is a time and a place to do all that. Don't get me wrong, but in the moment when they need that listening ear, that is not the time to turn into fix-it mode or to lecture mode or to teach them your great wisdom that you've experienced throughout your life. The time in that moment is to listen to them. And that's what they shared with me, both preparing for this presentation and preparing for the other presentation. Is teens just want to be understood and they want to be listened to. So what's a little thing that we can remember to do that? I'm a little cheesy at times, so hopefully you'll remember it this way. You want to love them. What does that mean? You listen with the intent, that's a key word there, intent to what? Understand. What are we trying to understand? Again, when we're dealing with depression and anxiety and stuff like that, we want to understand their thoughts and feelings. If they feel like someone and they believe someone understands them and gets them, now this is a two-edged sword. Because I'm going to tell you to understand them, but you don't tell them you understand them, right? Because as a parent, how many have said to your kid, oh, I understand what you're going through? What's the first thing they say?
no, you don't.
No, you don't. You don't understand me. You don't know what it's like to be a teenager. Now they stop there, but I'm going to add a little phrase for them. What they should be saying is, you don't understand what it's like to be a teenager in 2020 or even a year ago. Take out 2020 is what we're thinking about. But that's a whole nother issue, obviously. But just in this day and age, I tell parents, one, we have to believe that we don't understand them. Yes, we were once teenagers, and we do have to remember that. I always ask my parents, try to remember when you were a teenager. again, one of the major differences that sets our teens apart from us is definitely this. We did not grow up with social media, with the just the constant stimulation, constant information overload that they're experiencing from either whether it's the social media stuff, the news, TikTok, endless videos on YouTube. It is just, again, 24/7 stimulation. We don't know what that's like. One of the trauma we put up here, again, I don't see this a lot in the office, but I've talked to kids and it's in the back of their mind. Again, safety and violence, school shootings. Again, most of us did not grow up ever hearing about that. Obviously, the first big one was Columbine, really rocked the country, and that started a chain of events there. And now kids are going through, even though it hasn't happened in a while, but every year kids are doing drills in that type of thing. So they're being constantly or pretty regularly reminded that, hey, this could happen and here's what we do if it does. So I don't know if it causes a lot of stress and anxiety, but I think it's in the back of their mind. We didn't have to deal with that. We didn't have to deal with phones. We didn't, and other things. So no, we don't want to say we understand, but our goal and our intent is to at least understand their thoughts and their feelings. And then when we feel like we've got a good idea of it, we want to validate their thoughts and their feelings. And validate does not mean that we agree with them. We might have very different thoughts and opinions and feelings, but we want to validate that they have a right to their thoughts and their feelings. Because so often we minimize, we downplay their experiences. And to them, it's very real. And yes, some of them, let's be honest, are trivial. We're like, what? You're freaking out about that? Not a big deal. I've been there, done that. I have a kid that likes to really get worked up over things. And when we try to told her that's not a big deal, it just makes it worse. But when we can validate it and we can be mindful in that moment, to just give her moment and give her permission to feel in that moment, it usually decreases a lot quicker than if we try to talk some sense into her, to fix it. Because what does that do? That just pushes them away from us. And then next time they're struggling, how quick are they going to come talk to us? They're not. They're going to go to a teacher, a friend's parent, a friend, and there's time for that. And I think that's the other thing as parents we have to understand is there's also a reality, no matter what our connection is, at times, kids just don't want to talk to their parents about certain things for whatever reason. And if you're the parent that your kid comes to you and talks to you about everything, more power to you, you're doing something very right. But most of us, myself included, and, it can be a little ego thing for me when my kid comes to me and says, hey, I'd like to talk to a therapist. I'm right here. You can talk to me. It's free too. I don't have to pay anybody for it. But no, they don't want to. And that's okay. And I told my kids, you ever want to talk to a therapist, you come tell me and we'll make it work. Because I want them to have someone safe that they can go to. If they don't want it be us, and they don't want to hear our lecture. And that's true. It's been true for me. So that's one thing that we can also do. We can offer that opportunity, especially if we're talking about depression and anxiety and those feelings. Having a third party, a professional, might be a good answer for that to help them work through those feelings and those emotions. What time do we have till? Okay, and then that's when questions will start? Okay, sounds good. I just want to make sure. And so let's look at some other things that kids said. And on the handout, the things that you can get online, you'll get all 35 of those responses that kids made in that one. When I asked them how parents can do to connect with them, I'd like to read maybe just a couple to give you an idea. And then I'll read a couple of things what kids said preparing for this one. So there's kind of themes in this, and I think, and it all applies because again, the more we connect with our teen, the better able we'll be able to help them through these challenging emotions and times. One kid said parents need to stop talking and listen, to let their child speak their mind without having any interruptions. We struggle with that. Again, we want to jump in and teach and fix and do all that we talked about. The thing that we need to realize, once we do this, is we love them in that moment, we listen, understand, and validate, then we really need to practice to shut it and stop there. And that's probably our biggest challenge sometimes as parents, is to just let it be in that moment. Now, if there's something we need to talk about or we do want to teach, I always tell parents, wait a couple hours, wait a day, come back to it once it's settled, once they've had the opportunity to process it. And you might say something like, hey, after you shared that with me, I was thinking about it. And then you ask them, hey, can I share you some thoughts that I have or some ideas that I have for you? 9 times out of 10, a kid will be very willing to listen to you at that point. But if you try to do the same thing in the moment, what do? You're not listening to me. You just want to fix it, whatever. It's weird, but that happens a lot. Now, what if they say, no, I really don't want to listen to it? Sometimes we have to get, okay. And we don't share in that moment and we wait for another time. One kid said they should understand their kids. They shouldn't try too hard to be involved in their lives to the point where it feels invasive. They also shouldn't be too distant, just somewhere in the middle. Easier said than done, but I think very well said. They can be more patient and willing to listen. And again, that was about connecting, but then we're asking kids about how parents can help them with depression and anxiety. That was a big thing. Multiple kids said the 2 same things: be patient with them and listen and understand them. Again, this keeps coming up. Kids are longing to be heard, to be listened to, and to be understood. And if we just stop there and we start to do that with our teens more mindfully and with more intent, I guarantee you'll start helping your kids get through their emotions, and you'll build a better connection with them, and you'll get through it together as a family. Doesn't mean kids are going to get through high school without having some sort of level of depression, anxiety, stress, being overwhelmed. Absolutely not. Most kids are going to be, and for, again, all those different reasons. We're not trying to keep them from those things. We want to help them get through those things. I asked a couple of kids, and it seems like what not to do came up more when talking about depression and anxiety. Here's what not to say. And again, this came from teens themselves. You're doing this for attention, right? Being over dramatic, you're talking about stress and anxiety and depression. Don't say that. Are you depressed again? That was another one the kids said. We kind of infer some things there that, yeah, maybe it's a habit, but again, we're minimizing that. But, oh, you're depressed again. Okay. Or I suffered from depression and anxiety, so I understand what you're going through. Or here's what I did, so you should do the same thing. Don't say that. You have it so good. You shouldn't be depressed. You should be grateful. Oh, okay. Great. You have a lot of things. I had a kid just tell me the other day, come from an affluent family, and he said, I don't care about all the things I have. He's like, yeah, I'm spoiled. He admitted it. He's like, that stuff means nothing to me. I want to be happy. And so that was pretty sobering. Don't share with the world. Here's another problem I think is teens that they report to me when it comes to these things, depression and anxiety and all this stuff. They come to us, they tell us, and then we start telling our friends, or we tell our church community, or we tell this person or that person, and now all of a sudden everybody's coming up to them and going, are you okay? You all right? And they're like, well, what are you talking about? And then they're like, crap, my parents told everybody what I'm struggling with. That's not going to help them. Not letting them talk to a counselor. I've had that happen. And or I've talked to people that a kid would say, this is not necessarily my clients because they're in a camp, they're seeing someone, but more family and friends that I've heard where kids have asked, hey, mom, dad, can I go see someone? Oh, you don't need to see someone. That's not going to help you. I am working with one young lady that she's like, I don't think my mom thinks this is doing anything. She really doesn't believe in counselors. She's just, I was like, oh, okay. Well, at least she's letting you come. So that's a bonus. We talked about don't tell them what they think or feel. They've said that. And don't try to force them to talk about their feelings. Be patient. Let them talk about it on their own. Another interesting thing that the kids said about depression and anxiety is what to do is give them their space and let them have some alone time. Let them go to their room. Let them process this out in their own head. A lot of times they will do that. A lot of times we want to talk about it. We want to get it out. And we want to kind of force them to keep it coming. Talk to us. Tell us your feelings. And that overwhelms them and that puts a lot of pressure on them. Sometimes they do just need some time to process it, but there's a balance because then they isolate. That can be an issue. And so we do have to walk a tightrope there. But those are some things that kids have said what to do and what not to do. All right, there is another topic that I think is really important, and when we're talking about especially depression, that we want to get to. That is the topic of suicide. Is anybody listening, either here or at home, that has experienced a suicide in the family? Any suicide, and especially a teen suicide, my heart goes out, and I know I don't know personally, I have no idea what that feels like, but I've worked a lot with it, unfortunately, professionally. Teen suicide rates are definitely skyrocketing along with all of this stuff. Arizona's definitely had its fair share. The East Valley here has had its fair share. It happens. Obviously, one is too many, but it happens a lot more than we realize. And so I do want to talk about that because when we start talking about teens and depression, we really want to know when they start saying certain things or some ideas, what can we do as parents? That's a big question that parents have for me. Well, what my kid says this or my kid's doing this. What does that mean? How far should I take it? What should I do? Should I dump them in a hospital and this, or take them to residential treatment, whatever the case may be? So I really want to talk about that and hopefully answer some questions or some inside questions. Great, excellent. Yeah, so I want to make sure I get through this. So yeah, 5 minutes and we'll start taking some questions. Thank you. Like everything, like the emotions are on a continuum, understanding suicidality is on a continuum. And so on one end is suicide attempt or success. I tell my own kids this, and I tell clients this, people this, most kids in today's world probably will not graduate high school without knowing somebody that has committed suicide. If they do, more wonderful. But right now, it's just chances are high. And so, at the other end, here I put self-harm. I'll say why in a moment, but self-harm is cutting or any form of other harm to the body in a way to cope with the stresses and challenges of life. So we'll hear kids a lot say, I don't want to be here. It's very vague, but they'll say that. Doesn't necessarily mean they want to commit suicide. They're just feeling overwhelmed. They don't have the answers. They don't have the tools and the skills to deal with that pressure that we talked about earlier. And they just want to disappear. They just want to be gone. Alarming, yes. Not to the extent of necessarily, they may not be thinking about suicide and often aren't. Sometimes they'll say, I want to die, but no plan and no intent to take their life. But they may talk about wanting to die. Next is they have a plan. They've thought about it. They've thought about, if I were to commit suicide or take my own life, this is what I may do. But it's no, they really don't have a no intent. That could be a lot of different reasons. It could be they just really don't want to. They've just thought about it. They may say, I don't have the courage to, whatever the case may be. Then there's a plan with the intent and the means. And so this is kind of, might be some others, this is kind of what I have found working with people and kids that kind of fall into these type of categories. So when we start hearing things that raise these alarms that there might be thinking about this, we want to start asking some key questions. Key questions like, what does you don't want to be here mean? What does wanting to die mean? Do you have, don't be afraid to ask these strong questions. Do you have a plan? Do you want to commit suicide? People think, well, I don't want to put that idea in their head. You don't have to worry about it. They hear about it, social media, they go on sites that, and post and Instagram accounts, they glorify it and do all these things. It's out there. You're not going to be putting anything in their head, I promise. We really want to get to what are they thinking and what's their intent. And so we just want to ask bold questions and listen. And again, not freak out, stay calm. Even if they say, yeah, I have a plan. I have, I want to do this. Okay, stay calm, talk about it. If we need to make some adjustments, if we do need to get them into a hospital, we do need to get them on medication or something, then absolutely take all precaution necessary. But this is just something that I really wanted to go over. Self-harm, come back to this. That can be really alarming because it can be really messy and it can be really graphic and really like alarming. But 9 times out of 10, self-harm is not suicidal behavior. It's coping behavior. It's like somebody who drinks to deal with their emotions, or somebody who does drugs to deal with their emotions, or any other addictive behaviors. It alleviates the emotional pain that they're going through for that brief moment in time. And so they don't have to feel those deep, heavy emotions. They can feel physical pain, and that takes away the emotional pain, and physical pain is easier to deal with than emotional pain. And so, yes, we want to be alarmed. Yes, we want to get help, but we don't want to think necessarily that this is an attempt for suicide. Can be if they're where they're cutting, how deep, and all of that. And again, what's their intent? Vast majority of kids that I've worked with that self-harm are not trying to end their life. They're just trying to deal and cope with their emotions. So try to stay calm. Try to not talk to them, understand them. Again, go back to loving them. Listen, understand, and validate. The saying that I heard years ago was, people need love the most when it's deserved the least. And I think that's true with our kids, whether it's their behavior, their emotions. When we can really show that genuine love and concern for them and their well-being, and their emotions and their thoughts, and validate those, we will really help them understand those emotions. Okay, hope all that makes sense. We would like to turn it over for any kind of questions you have. I'll do my best.
Can I just make a comment and excuse me, in regards to what you said about them saying, I want to kill myself, or I don't want to be here. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I went through that with my son, and he's just like, I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, well, you don't understand how it makes me feel when you talk like that. I said, because I work in the behavioral health, that I'm like, you just need to realize that when you say that, I have to take it seriously. And it's very concerning to me. So if you're not going to do this, then we need to get you counseling so that you can figure out what it is that's going on, that you're making those comments.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And it's so true. We never want to take any statement flippantly or casually. We just want to understand it. And here's the other challenge. And I don't know if you've heard this through your teens. I know I've heard it with mine. They say the phrase, "Oh, I'm going to commit." Oh, they get so desensitized to that concept that it's lost its value or it's in seriousness. And so even kids that really truly that are happy kids will say, "Oh, I'm going to commit," but they don't know what that's doing to another kid that's really considering it, right? So they have to be really mindful, and again, how it affects us parents to hear our own child say that. So and we can express that, not through anger, not through shame and guilt, but hey, I want you to know how I feel or what I think when you say that, and what I would do if I lost you, and so sharing that is really important. Thank you for that comment. Any other questions or comments? So how does the whole thing do that? Okay, we got the situational, the biochemical. How do we know the difference? Well, it's hard and it's trial and error. My kind of test in the office, or at least my thought pattern, is I'm going to give them all sorts of skills and tools to deal with the situational. And if they come back several weeks in a row and they're really putting in the effort and they're really working on their thoughts, they're doing other things, like exercising or getting out and doing physical things, eating right, and doing some other skills and tools that we teach along with all this stuff. And they say, "Oh, I journal, I exercise, I do all these things, I watch my thoughts, and I just can't get this feeling away." Then we might go, okay, they put an effort in. Now, if they come back week after week and they haven't put the effort, that could be another. Maybe they don't have the energy, even the will to put in the effort. So we gauge it after we teach the skills and the tools. If it's just not going well, we may want to consider and talk to our physician or a psychiatrist and go. I do tell my clients, though, if you do go to your doctor or physician or a psychiatrist, you will 9 times out of 10 walk out with a prescription. That just is their model. That's what they do. It's not bad. It just is. And so, but just know that. But great question. I hope that kind of helps that. Other questions or thoughts or comments or? Well, the comment there, the question, I think talks about it. She tells me she wants to do things. I may just start to put in limits to keep them safe. And then she says, "Well, if you're going to do that, then I'm just not going to tell you. Now I don't trust you," or that's a tough one because it's a fine line. But safety always comes first, no matter what. It's like for a counselor working with teens, I tell them, one, confidentiality is really important. However, there's 3 exceptions. You tell me you're being hurt, you tell me you're hurting something, or you're going to hurt yourself to the extent that your life is in danger, I'm going to break that confidence. And I think as parents, we have that I have that mentality as a parent too. Look, I'll keep confidence or whatever, won't really meddle too much, but if I'm worried that your safety is a factor, I'm going to take what I need as precaution to make sure you're safe. We'll risk them not coming to us and talking to us. Their safety is number one. Now we have to, again, determine if they say, "I don't want to be here," and all of a sudden we take the door off their bedroom and we take their razors away from them and we strip everything from them. That might be an overreaction, right? And maybe they wouldn't come talk to us because of that, and maybe they'd be justified in that. So we kind of have to know what level we're at and what then we do in place of that. Does that make sense? A hard one to answer, but yeah, safety first. Other thoughts or questions? Better? Oh, yeah, okay. There you go. Good question. The question was for you at home, the biochemical challenge. Is there a magic test or a test that can result in letting us know what imbalance there is? Ultimately, I'd have to have a doctor answer that question. My understanding is, and if there's a doctor around or listening, please answer. Really, no. Ultimately, and even psychiatry, it's an experiment. They'll say, well, we'll try this one. If that doesn't work, we'll try this one. And they're just really trying to find that right fit. It might take a few times to get the medication that works best with your child's biochemistry or even with your own biochemistry. And if you've been through that, and I wish we could say, oh, you're lacking this much serotonin or this much dopamine, and this is what we can do here's what the medication do to lift that. That would be really convenient. But unfortunately, I don't think there is that magic test. And if I'm wrong and somebody can correct me on that, please let me know. I think we can understand some levels, some blood work, but not to that extent. I wish. Really nice.
Does anybody online, you guys that are watching via Google Meets, have questions? You can type them in the box to the chat box.
So if you want them to see someone but they won't go, okay, so the question is, what if I want my kid to go see a therapist or a psychiatrist and they just refuse? I've definitely had that happen. And well, here's my thought. One, I don't think kids should ever be forced to go. It happens, they'll come in my office and I can see it in their eyes right away. They do not want to be there. They're angry, they're ticked, they're resenting their parent for making them. Now, sometimes I can break through with that. Oftentimes I can't. We can try. It might be a waste of time and money for that. If you have the time to maybe let the therapist build a rapport, because with counseling adolescents, a little different than adult. Adult comes in and they know what they want to get. I always tell one of the most important things about finding a counselor is that it's a good fit. If your kid leaves the counseling office, that first one says, Mom, Dad, I'll go to counseling, but I don't want to go to that guy. He's weird. I always tell my clients, go to someone else. That's okay. I will not be offended because if they're not a good fit, they're not going to open up. Same is true for adults, but adults can be less picky for that. I mean, I just had one today that I emailed that I hadn't seen, and Mom said, hey, we're trying to, wasn't a great fit. We're trying to find one that's a better fit for her. I'm like, great, that's okay. Is there anything I can help you with and find one that's a good fit? I will do my best. You can try to make people get to the parking lot and they call or they come in, the parent comes in and says, my kid won't get out of the car. So it does happen. We just let them know when they're ready, you'll provide that opportunity for them. Making them is a gamble.
We have a question. What about the passwords and locking the doors? We should know those. And should we not have doors locked? 13 to 14 years old, new to social media.
That's a big question. So, I'm assuming locking bedroom doors, and then passwords on phones. Yeah. I mean, no, kids shouldn't lock their bedroom door. I mean, I think we should be able to respect, our kind of rule in our house is we always knock before coming in, whether it's me to my son's room, me to my daughter's room, my wife, both. We always knock. Can we come in? We value their privacy. We value, whatever. Locking, no, I don't think there's ever a time for that. I shouldn't say never. Rarely a time. They're changing. Hey, I'm just changing really quick. I'll lock in a second. Great. Passwords, I do think parents should have all their kids, be able to access their social media accounts and be able to peruse them. Does that mean you should watch them every day? I don't know, maybe, depending on what your kid's done with it. If they've already shown that they've done questionable things, perhaps. Every kid's different. That's the other thing about parenting and doing parenting presentations, because what works for one family may not be appropriate for another family. Maybe for your kid, allowing them to lock the doors is totally okay. Maybe taking the door off its hinges is okay. I'm not usually a big fan, but depending on the circumstance, it might be. How much you look at your kid's phone. Everybody's different. So that's, you take these principles and you apply them to your situation that best fits you. If anybody tells you this is what you need to do and this is the exact way, I'd probably be pretty leery of it, because we're all doing our best, especially raising teens. We're trying, and sometimes we fail. I know I fail as a parent routinely, especially with my oldest. I tell her, you're my experiment child, sorry. I'll be better with your sister and your brother, but for you, I'm learning, I'm doing my best. So I hope that kind of answers that. Any other questions? One more question, she says.
I don't think so.
If you do have any questions, the website, you can go and get the information and the slides and all of that. I'll have my email on there, and you please feel free to shoot me over an email and say, hey, I was at the presentation the other day, I have this question. I'm always happy to answer those emails as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for the awesome presentation. I hope that everyone here and online got some valuable information. For those on the Google Meet, Lindsay, I think, posted a link to this information. So that's going to contain basically the PowerPoint slides that were recreated on the whiteboard today. And then I will also update that on the website with Garron's email address so that those online can contact him if needed. And then for those here in person, he has his business cards on the table as you exit, and there's also a handout that has the same link where you can find this information on a website, and it has some, on the other side, just some local resources for you as well. So thank you again. We hope that you got some really valuable information, and there's social workers on all the high school campuses now, which is awesome. And if you need help for your child, please reach out to them. We're here to help, and we want to help as much as we can. So thank you all so much for attending, and thank you to everyone who is on the Google Meet. We'll be sending out the recording within the next few days in case you want to rewatch it, or you have people that you know who would be interested in hearing about this too. So Lindsay, do you have any final things to say from the Google Meet?
I think that's it. Some people are asking for the website. I just posted the website that will have the PowerPoint for tonight. And then as far as a recording of this presentation, that'll be on the CUSD counseling webpage, which I also posted a link to that, as well as mine. I'll email it out to all Perry families. But if you have any further questions, feel free to type it. But I've typed all the websites in the chat box. So hopefully you guys can access that.
Yes, and yeah, the recording will be sent out via whichever social worker you have on your campus. So whoever sent you the invitation for this meeting will send you the recording once it comes to my inbox. I'll send it out to them, and we'll get it out to you. So thank you. We will end the Google Meet shortly, and then you all are welcome to either, Garron said he'll be here if you have other questions for him. If not, we have the handout and some of his business cards on the table as you exit. So thank you all again for being here. We appreciate it. Thanks.